Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share yet another update on my experience with the Microsoft Surface Pro 3. Today's video is about the bugs and issues that I've run into with this device, because even though I've given it quite a bit of praise, because frankly it deserves it, it's unmatched in being the thinnest, lightest laptop replacement. Even if you don't care for the Typecover Pro Edition, it's still just an incredible machine at 1.72 pounds. Incredibly thin, incredibly powerful, and I'll say that over and over again because it still amazes me that we have this sort of technology in our hands at a price that at least doesn't blow my lid off. It is expensive, granted, but you can get into the party for $799, which is just as expensive as many mobile OS-based devices like the iPad, and certainly there are people that spend $1,000 on those. Forget that Samsung doesn't have options quite as expensive, but there's a market for that industry, so it should be obvious that there would be one for legitimate, true PCs in similar form factors. So what's the downside to having what seems to be the perfect device? You know, you've got a 12-inch high resolution, a 1440p display, 3:2 aspect ratio, which is perfect for work and play, at least in my experience so far. A capacitive button that's been relocated and also, in my opinion, is better than where it used to be. The ClearType display is still one of the best in class. You've got an i5 or i7 or i3 processor that's going to basically outmuscle anything else you could buy at any other price point. 4 or 8 gigs of RAM, some fantastic wireless performance, decent internal graphics. The integrated HD 4400 is serviceable, but you know, nothing new, nor is even the 5000 that's on the i7 version. And you have an SSD that is relatively solid. And if you've watched my reviews, you already know that I think this is really just one of the best computers ever made, including the build quality. But like anything else, it's far from perfect. So let's talk about it. Where does the Surface Pro 3 come up short? Well, the first thing for me personally, battery life. Even though it's estimated at 9 and it gets somewhere between 7 and 9 realistically, depending on how you run it, I think everyone would have liked to have seen more battery life. What people have to remember is that Microsoft maintained an incredibly thin profile on this, and that is really the answer as to why battery life didn't get that bump up that so many people maybe thought was coming. They also have to remember we do have a higher, larger resolution display that definitely eats quite a bit more battery, despite that newer fourth generation Haswell lineup of chips that has been injected into the Surface Pro 3 configuration scheme. But it's noteworthy. With regard to the actual Typecover, that's another area I want to talk about, because I've praised the Typecover for being a phenomenal improvement over previous generations, and that's still accurate, but there are bugs out of the box, and I'm assuming most of these can be addressed with firmware, like many of the Surface Pro 1 and 2 growing pains. And basically that bug relates to connectivity. Often I will find, you know, I'll lock it in like I'm doing right now, if it actually takes, there we go. And basically sometimes it will identify that it has connected, other times it won't. Like right now it appears it's working, you can see I'm scrolling, can't pinch to zoom because I'm in Chrome, but it is functioning. I would say 1 out of 10 times, maybe it's 2 out of 10 times, I will have a little bit of trouble with this. So it's definitely something on the software side, in my opinion. And from what I've read online, I'm not the only one, and that's why I'm bringing it up with all of you, because, again, despite all of the praise I've given this device, I'm not going to be critical I'm not going to avoid being critical where I do need to be. So this is an issue, a bug I will call it, that I have noticed regarding connectivity, or the seamlessness of the connectivity with the Typecover Pro. So it's not happening that frequently, but frequently enough that if I didn't tell you about it, I would be doing you a disservice. The next thing I wanted to talk about was Pen performance. There's no question that even though for me personally, the pen performance with the N-Trig stylus and actual sensitivity of the display is a wash, I think for many artists out there, it's not going to be a wash. I think they're going to miss the Wacom technology, and I understand why. In terms of how quickly the pen is picked up, it doesn't lag. I wouldn't say that because I've been working with an N-Trig stylus on the Duo 11 and 13 after that, and I've been really pleased with the performance for general note-taking. But there's no question that when it comes down to the finite stuff, I think that the Wacom experience is definitely better overall. If you're in a position where you are using it on a regular basis and you have input on it, feel free to post it in the comments. I'm not claiming in any way to be an expert in that regard because, again, artistic endeavors, at least of that sort, that is not my specialty. But at least from what I've seen for general note-taking, that's where things were awash. When it comes to being the mobile artist, the 4:3 aspect ratio, I think, gives a nicer balance for note-taking, but I'm not sure for artwork. I think it's definitely a better palette for all handwriting, but that N-Trig Wacom trade-off is another area of contention. Again, for me personally, this is not really a trade-off, but it is obvious to see why for some it may be. Even though the included OneNote button is a great feature, that also is something I'd like to point out that I've had on my Duo 13, even though it wasn't a OneNote button, it was the VAIO paper button. Same idea. All you do is hold down a stylus button and it will automatically launch a note-taking app. It's nowhere near as good as OneNote and this experience, but that's part of what makes the Surface Pro 3 basically reference hardware, and now reference hardware that's practical and desirable for just about everyone. In terms of other things you have to know, people have been worried about heat. I can tell you right now that unless you really push this tablet, heat is not going to be much of an issue. Nor will the fans spinning up. There's only one fan in this model, two in the previous generation. I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, and at least in my experience so far, the fan is not coming on that often. If you're just web browsing, you'll rarely hear it, but when you're starting to load up on different applications, have several things that are heavier than traditional light tasks like email and browsing and some basic video playback. I'm not going to say 1080p or 1440p video because that will definitely kick on the fans, much as will gaming. Even then, things are not going to get very loud when you compare it to what you would traditionally expect. But it is something to be aware of. And with regard to the heat, the essential hotspot is where you would expect it. It's right here. This is where everything pretty much is in terms of the computing power of the system, and that's why all of the ventilation, as you can see, is laced into the top border. And so that is a great engineering design because that means that this system is going to always have the ability to cool itself as long as the kickstand is activated, because none of the cooling, the active cooling that's going on, will actually be blocked. So no impediment. This isn't like a traditional laptop where you put it on your bed or your lap and you're blocking the main cooling fans, which is why you end up essentially giving your legs a searing job as if you were putting them on a grill, depending on what device you use. But if you use a MacBook Pro, anything made of aluminum, the Razer Blade 14, those type of systems are going to get incredibly hot. So the Surface will get hot in this whole area, but especially since your hands generally won't be holding it there, that's another very good designing point, even though this is a video about being critical about the device. Another thing I want to address is throttling. Now, a lot of people have been talking about in forums, is this device actually less powerful than the previous generation? Because the Surface Pro 2 did not have a throttling issue in terms of temperature thresholds that this, or at least some are saying the Surface Pro 3 is experiencing. Now, I personally have not encountered that, so I can't speak to it. Those of you that have, certainly let us know, but I have not noticed any of that thus far in my experience with the tablet. But I've been reading about it, so I want to address it because I don't think that it's in any way a hallucination of users. I think it's a very realistic possibility, considering the fact that we've got pretty much the same hardware here, for the most part, as the Surface Pro 2, but a more demanding display, which definitely does not work in favor of overall performance. So I could see where a trade-off may have been made. Again, I haven't seen it firsthand, but let me know. This product has been out since the 20th, and I know many of you have it in your possession and are enjoying it, or maybe not enjoying it, depending on what your experience has been like. So provide the feedback. It's great for the community. I always encourage it for a reason. We're all here to help each other out. We all share this hobby, this interest in trying to not only find the best tech that's out there, but the best tech for our needs. So other than that, I'm trying to think if there was any other lingering issue, but so far I've also seen some people mention Bluetooth and Wi-Fi issues. I can't speak to Bluetooth. Wi-Fi I can speak to. I have seen, again, this is kind of like the type cover experience, maybe 1 or 2 times out of 10. I'm going to give it that estimation again. I will wake the device up and I will not have Wi-Fi connectivity. This definitely looks like a software update necessity, no question about it. And essentially the only way to fix that will be to either reboot your system, or of course much more easily just disable and then re-enable your Wi-Fi adapter, which is ridiculous right now, and that's why I think a software update is around the corner. I thought initially maybe it was just my device, but after, again, basically getting online, seeing what the rest of the public is experiencing, it appears I am not alone in regard to the Wi-Fi connectivity issue. And as I mentioned before, some users have also complained about Bluetooth dropouts as well. So right now it appears the key things Microsoft needs to fix with this in the form of a software update, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth connectivity issues, which are not great. At least Wi-Fi for me in terms of the problems have not been so bad, but it would not be right if I didn't mention what I experienced, clearly, and I always do. For those of you that aren't regular, now you know. And of course the issues with the type cover, because that is a principal function of this device, and that is probably going to be one of the most disappointing things that anyone will run into, because you expect the type cover to work. After all, it's this new and improved one, the Type Cover Pro, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's not typing, the mouse isn't working, and you've got to reconnect it or maybe reboot in order to get functionality back. So I really believe these are all just, you know, first week bugs, but they really shouldn't have been there out of the box. I still give an incredible amount of praise and love to this device. It really is one of the best pieces of technological hardware and execution that I've ever seen. So these are very minor critiques, but in the long term, the spectrum of the length and success of the device, these are things that must be addressed in the immediate. Sorry if you didn't enjoy staring at the static screen, but again, this was more about talking to all of you about the problems, the known issues I've experienced, as well as have read about, so that you are now all aware of some of the minor issues, and I will refer to them as minor because they are, that Surface Pro 3 owners have been experiencing. If you have any questions or comments, anything to add, please feel free, of course. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.